it's true. It is your Feel Good Breakfast show right here on S3, and we're so glad you decided to join us, Mzansi. You know, we always bring you only the best of the best when it comes to our guests, but we also get into very important conversations. Now, the G20 spends a lot of time on two words that sound abstract, but affect real life: financial stability. And when things go wrong in one corner of the system, it can spread fast, hitting currencies, interest rates, as well as jobs. And South Africans feel that through bond repayments, food prices, and the rand. And today we're asking what systemic risk really means and how the G20 tries to keep shocks from spiraling. So how are we doing that? We're talking to our chartered accountant and entrepreneur, the guy who knows a whole lot about all of this. It is Hiten Keshav, to translate the big headlines into simple, practical takeaways for you and for me. Everyone, let's give him a feel-good welcome, please. Hiten, how are you?
Good, thanks, Anele. How are you?
I'm amazing, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Let's jump into it, ne? Because these are very big terms, and, you know, I feel like a lot of us, we appreciate it being able to be broken down the way that you always do so beautifully. Because we want to know what exactly is systemic risk, and how does it snowball into a little bit of a crisis sometimes?
So the essentials of systemic risk is just think of a crack on a wall, right? If it keeps getting bled with dampness, it's going to expand and essentially break apart.
Yeah.
So essentially what the G20 is all about is to manage that risk with the banks, to ensure that the regulations and the way they manage credit to the consumer and to other businesses are in line with the policies that are set to ensure that our economy doesn't crash.
Hectic. So this G20 is very, very important for anyone thinking it's not.
Just think of it as a playbook. It's really a playbook around what are the guides and the principles that, from an economic standpoint, when banks need to lend out to consumers and to other businesses, they do so in a way that is responsible.
Amazing. I love that. I love regulation. I love it a lot, especially because a lot of the time entrepreneurs and businesses need to be protected, right?
Yes, and that's the reason for such things. If you think about the 2008-2007 crisis, right? There was this whole bubble that formed. A lot of lending was provided, and then all of a sudden, it was a snap. No one could pay back their debt, and that. Essentially, the G20 is there to avoid those circumstances and issues re-arising. In South Africa, a typical example is African Bank. If you look at African Bank about just over a decade ago, it fell apart. The Treasury had to come back and save it and get it out of debt and then re-regulate it, and now it's back on its feet running. But we don't realize that it took over a decade for African Bank to resurrect itself.
Hectic. And I think that that's why it's so important for us to have these conversations, right? Because some of these things just pass us by because life is so hectic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we forget that what happens in the past can always come back to bite us if we don't learn our lessons, especially as South Africans.
And speaking of lessons, Hiten, you know, especially from your CFO entrepreneur point of view, when we talk about shocks that usually start, you know, in the business, or even shocks that come from the economy into the businesses, where does it normally come from? Is it the banks? Is it government debt? Is it fast-growing, you know, non-banks? Where exactly does it come from?
So the biggest issue that we have as South African, as an economy, is our government. We look at our GDP debt ratio, it's now increasing consistently, 80% on that end, right?
Sure.
That now then ends up having a ripple effect based on the consumer's pocket. Our tax rates start to increase on that end. Interest, as an example, if you look at the Reserve Bank right now, they're very adamant in maintaining inflation at 3%, right? And if you look at the quarterly reviews that they have on the interest rates, we've dropped, yes, by 1 percentage basis points over the last 12 months. But analysts and economists are generally saying there should be a little bit more leniency being provided. But the Reserve Bank is now saying, no, we want to keep inflation at 3%.
Sure.
So these are the knock-on effects that are taking place in the consumer's pocket and in the small businesses pocket and other individuals' pockets because of what the playbook is being built for.
Yes, my goodness. And this is why then I also need to ask you, you know, especially with the G20 coming in and saying financial stability, what exactly are the 3 signs that South Africans should be on the lookout for?
Oh, it varies depending on where you are, right? If you're a small business owner, from a financial stability perspective, or if you, just in general, we want to see that the rand is not depreciating. We want to ensure that our bond yields are not spiking. And we want to make sure that interest rates itself are either stable and not increasing again, because then it's going to cause an issue with lending itself. Consumer is going to feel the pinch. If you look at retail, the retail sector last year, this time, versus this year now. Last year, the retail sector in the economy was booming after our elections, and that this year, everything is down. And people are asking, comparison-wise, why is that the case?
Yeah.
And many people are saying interest rates and inflation is an issue for this.
That's so crazy. And especially just thinking of the fact that, just like you're saying, it was just last year. So you would think and hope that the trend might be a little bit similar. Yeah.
You know, basic knowledge would say, well, last year, this time, everything was moving up. Shouldn't it happen this year, this time, especially if the stocks were recovering and the businesses are making decent profits and margins?
Yes.
But it's not the case. So it just shows what consumer pressure actually takes place outside of economic standpoints that we all have to be mindful of.
Well, then let's talk about how South Africa really plugs into the global trends. Because, you know, there's global rule setters tied to the G20. How exactly is it that they actually do things to sort of keep banks safe? And where do we fit in exactly?
So that's where the G20 plays, what I said, a rule book. It's that playbook, right? That playbook then goes down to the SARB, the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank then plays that playbook across all the banks itself, right? The regulators then play their role. And if you look at banks itself, when it comes to lending procedures, especially for small businesses and individuals, it's extremely stringent on that end. It's not easy to get a loan. It's not easy to get facilities as a small business owner today on that end. And that's where the safeguard of the G20 actually comes in, and the rule book. In terms of South Africa as its role, if you look at the G20, South Africa is spearheading as the only country in Africa, which we have to applaud ourselves. So it's playing a role and a lead as the continent's leading country to represent everyone else, so that whatever happens here, we then carry it across throughout the continent.
Beautiful. Hiten, we are not done with you because this is such a great conversation. And like I said, you break things down so lovely for everyone who might be there, like being like, what is G20? So we're going to be continuing. Mzansi, I promise you, you're going to get more and more answers because we're breaking things down really just so that we're able to, you know, have these conversations because they really are important, right? But also more than anything else, so that you can understand as a consumer what exactly is happening, and even as a business owner. We're going to take a short break and then we're going to be back after this. Don't go anywhere.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back, Mzansi. You're right here on your Feel Good Breakfast Show indeed. And this morning we are having a conversation all around G20 and unpacking what it means for you and for me and all of us as South Africans and where we fit in just the global sphere. Now, we're with Hiten Kashave unpacking the G20's focus on financial stability and systemic risk. And earlier on, we defined the risks and the early warning signs. Now we shift to the playbook. Who acts in a crisis and what households and SMEs can do this week. Now, friend, I hope you're ready because we're about to be educated indeed. Because, Hiten, I know that earlier on you kind of, you know, touched on the fact that there was a bank that went through a little bit of a, I want to call it an unstable moment, and the Reserve Bank had to jump in. So is that always the case, that if a big financial firm hits a bit of trouble, that the Reserve Bank is going to jump in? Or is there someone else? Is it regulators? Is it Treasury? Who exactly does that?
So the Reserve Bank will be the first one that comes in to stabilize the ship, essentially, to ensure that there's continuity. Because if a bank shuts down, what happens to all its customers? There's no service to be provided. So it allows for that continuity on that end. Then the regulators in that step in the background to then fix the cracks and set down, really lay the foundations. And the critical thing that will happen in the first 72 hours is generally communication and transparency of what is going on, with the insurance that there is business continuity.
Okay, so essentially with you saying communication, with what customers can expect, they'll be told, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everything will just stop.
Yeah, there's no need to stop, because think about it. If you have a bank account, right, and you transact on it daily, either from a business perspective or personal perspective, and things shut down, what's going to happen? You're going to go nervous. You're going to have people like toying outside the bank.
Yes, I want my money.
You want your money.
Yes.
Exactly. So in order to avoid all of that, to allow for business continuity, that's why the Reserve Bank will step in to ensure there's liquidation and there's flow of capital that can allow for that continuity.
Amazing. So we're never alone. We'll always be okay.
And, you know, to your point, South Africa, the one thing we should be the most grateful of from an economic standpoint, even though our credit regulations are so tight for small businesses and for individuals, we have the best banking system globally.
Really?
Even better than Europe, even better than America, regardless.
Oh my goodness. So we're world champions even in the bank.
Yes.
I love that for us.
And that, if you look at COVID as an example, right? And if you look at any times of markets, during the worst in bear markets,
Yeah.
you will always find that the banks are the most stable in South Africa.
Incredible. I love that. That gives me a little bit of security, you know? Yeah.
That's the one thing that as a global economy that we partake in, South Africa has got an uptake on, regardless of that. And hence, sometimes our Reserve Bank is very stringent, like I mentioned earlier, around inflation, etc. But it's because of a legacy that we've been able to carry that we don't want to uphold itself, because it holds our economy together, essentially. And with South Africa being such a diverse culture with a very high differentiation in our Gini coefficiency, it requires to be managed very diligently, because we've got people at the lower LSM bracket that need servicing, and then you've also got a higher LSM and higher corporates that are partaking in multinational businesses and events that also need that support structure. So we need to cater for a broad category of spectrum, and hence why that regulation and playbook is there.
That's incredible. And especially because we live in a country that unfortunately is so unequal, I think it's important that it's always taken into account. So it's amazing to hear that that's exactly what our banking system does, right?
Yes, and these are the things that happen in the background that we often as front-ending people don't always get to see and understand, and hence these type of shows help educate our people to understand that there is actually work happening in the background that's to our benefit.
Beautiful. And speaking of education, Hiten, I'm going to ask you to be our lecturer this morning, please, because I've got 3 terms here and I need you to really explain them to us and why they matter so much to savers. So it is resolution plans, deposit protection, and lender of last resort. In plain English, how can you explain those to us?
So the resolution plan is just, as the word states, it's your saving grace. What is the plan to resurrect the bank if it goes into liquidation, right?
Okay.
The deposit protection is to ensure that any money that you have in the bank, there's a cap of it that it's secured. So if you put your money 100,000 Rand away in a savings account, etc., and the bank liquidates, your money is then saved. You know you have guarantee of that itself. What was the last term you mentioned?
The final one is lender of last resort.
Lender of last resort is the Reserve Bank itself. They are the ones that will come in and step in to ensure that there is liquidation and ongoing support to be provided in the event a bank had to go into liquidation.
Okay, so there's a lot of protection that actually happens here, which is amazing. And I know that small businesses really are just, you know, entities that always need a whole lot of protection, like we said earlier on. So can you talk to me, what 3 simple moves can they actually employ to cut risk? And especially just to help them out a little bit. So is it cash buffer? Is it using more than one bank? What is it that they can do?
So definitely a cash buffer. Any small business that's out there, I always recommend them 6 to 12 months cash flow run rate. Make sure you have that. Why? Because in uncertain economic times, when there is no ongoing revenue that's hitting your top line, you at least have cash in the bank to manage. And for small business owners, there's an analogy we use.
Okay.
Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is reality.
Yes.
And so it's all well and good having high numbers of revenue and making good profits. But if your cash is not well managed, your liquidation that pays all your bills, you're not going to be alive at the end of the day. And with that, having different banking relationships are good. Because that allows you then to have other options and opportunities, so that in the event one bank decides to shift away from a certain aspect or falls apart. In South Africa's case, very unlikely. You have other options that are available. And lastly, if you're in the foreign exchange or you're exporting and importing, make sure you hedge your currency exchange rates. Why? Because then that avoids any forex gains or forex losses that you may incur in the event that the rand depreciates.
Amazing. And Hiten, very quickly, in one sentence, what would you say is a very important decision that needs to be made at the G20 to help South African households and SMEs?
I'll leave it with 2 words: economic inclusion for small businesses and for all consumers in South Africa.
Beautiful. Hiten, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. I always love being here.
Thank you. It is so incredible to be able to sit as a family and break it down, right? You know that the G20 is happening in Johannesburg very soon, but you're like, what is it? Well, my friend, now Now we know a whole lot more. For viewers, keep an eye on basic buffers, cash flow, debt costs, and emergency plans with your bank. We'll keep tracking the G20 outcomes and what they mean for your pocket, because at the end of the day, you heard it from Hiten, it's all about economic inclusion, which starts with us having that knowledge and being able to be a part of the conversation. And that is what we're doing right here on your Feel Good Breakfast show. You got to make sure you do not go anywhere. For now, we got to check in on my beautiful family in Cape Teasy, Foshizi. Family, what's going on?